A horrific rhythmic atmosphere diffused from the corpse king and swept across the space without reserve. In an instant, heaven and earth were once again surrounded by rhythms and formed a domain dominated by it. A horrific rhythmic atmosphere diffused from the corpse king and swept across the space without reserve. In an instant, heaven and earth were once again surrounded by rhythms and formed a domain dominated by it. Traces of musical rhythm burrowed into everyone's ears, probing into their spiritual souls. Even those powerful beings who had passed the second divine tribulation felt a shudder in their spiritual souls. Buzz! The fluctuations of the rhythm continued to spread from the corpse king. It was as if his body was merely a conductor. In a brief moment, the vast land was enveloped by the will contained in the rhythm. The music of a song began to play, and every single beating note seemed to contain endless sorrow. The divine requiem. Lord Luo's expression was solemn. He had a look of piety. He then sat cross-legged directly in this void, listening very carefully. Although this divine requiem was terrifying, it was also a great blessing to personally experience the long-lost divine requiem. Furthermore, it was possible that this divine requiem was being performed by Shinin the Great himself. Even if he was not in human form, he existed in another form, playing this stunning divine tune. As a rhythmic cultivator, Lord Luo appreciated the opportunity to hear the divine requiem here, even if it meant that he must withstand terrible rhythmic attacks. He did not deliberately resist the attacks, but allowed things to take their course, wanting to comprehend the fullness of the divine requiem. And because of his own cultivation in rhythm, he had stronger resistance than most. Of course, even if Lord Luo deliberately resisted it, it wouldn't do him much good. The divine requiem had shrouded the vast space and rang throughout this corner of the sky. It had wormed into everyone's ears and infiltrated their spiritual souls, so that there was absolutely nowhere to hide. Those major figureheads who had retreated sat cross-legged, trying to shut down all their senses. But it was totally futile. Once the divine requiem started to play, that endless sadness quickly took hold of their minds, dragging them into a world created by the mood of dejection. So much so that they have forgotten where they were, and were compelled to enter an atmosphere of extreme sorrow of their own making. As soon as the divine requiem sounded, the whole world grieved. As despondency percolated into this world, Yi Futian sat cross-legged like most people. Although his spiritual soul was in the body of Xinjia the Great Emperor, it was still impossible for him to resist the invasion of the divine music. This rhythm was particularly good at invading the spiritual souls, and the strong sense of sadness took hold of him once again. It was a feeling of desperation, endless emptiness, and endless sorrow. This emotion was then amplified to the point that it could make anyone who heard it lose their mind. As if mired in quicksand, they immersed themselves in that extreme sadness, unable to extricate themselves until their will was completely eaten away. Even those strong cultivators who had survived the twofold divine tribulation were strongly affected. They looked at the corpse king in front of them, while their own bodies were releasing a terrifying aura of the great path. They continued moving forward, intent on destroying the other. If they didn't, they would also be affected by the rhythm to the point of falling within that inescapable mood. However, as they moved forward, the rhythmic storm became even more frightening, engulfing their bodies and madly infiltrating their minds. A strong sense of grief was born involuntarily. It was as if they could no longer control their own will, but were controlled by that music. But the existence at this level had wills like iron that were hard to bend. Even in this state, they struggled to stretch out their hands, pointing at the body of the corpse king. A single arm was able to penetrate the rhythmic storm. It continued penetrating the storm little by little, until that arm was in front of the corpse king, pointing directly at his physical body. In other directions, those who had survived the twofold divine tribulations also tried to touch the corpse king by any means possible. At this moment, the space had been completely torn apart and shattered, and there was no power to stop the madness of the storm or the collapse of that space. The extremely brilliant light and the light of darkness appeared at the same time. Then they saw the body of the corpse king began to disperse a little bit at a time, until it completely disappeared, destroyed. Is he dead? Everyone wondered after what they had seen. That's not quite right. Their expressions became alert, though their sadness remained. The rhythm had not dissipated, and it was just a corpse. Even if its physical form was destroyed, it didn't necessarily mean anything. Previously, the rhythm had been using his body as a medium to play the music. That top cultivator, who had reached the front, lowered his head to check out the tomb below. He saw wisps of rhythmic fluctuations that had begun to drift outward. As the man stepped out, a heavy pressure suddenly dropped down, causing cracks upon the tomb. It started to break apart in the middle. He wanted to see what was hidden inside the tomb. Even though everything that happened before was extremely uncanny, as if the great emperor had truly existed, he didn't believe that Shinin the Great was still alive. If so, how could he have allowed them to do what they had done here? Inside this tomb, there might be secrets that were yet unknown to them. Once the tomb was broken open, an ancient sarcophagus appeared inside. It was a pure white sarcophagus. The terrifying rhythm was coming from it, and even divine consciousness could not penetrate and scan it. This was enough to sober up several cultivators who had survived the twofold divine tribulation. They stared at this white sarcophagus. Was the body of Shinin the Great inside? If it was indeed the corpse of the great emperor, then where did this rhythm come from? And why was it able to be played here? Moreover, the music from the sarcophagus did not stop but became stronger instead, so that these top cultivators felt as if they were inside an illusion, that they too were about to fall into that deepest sorrow. Boom! The aura from them was shocking. They fixed their attention on the sarcophagus. In any case, they were determined to break it open and expose the secrets inside the sarcophagus. If the corpse of the great emperor was really inside, it might be the beginning of another bloody conflict. Like before, they moved toward the sarcophagus, but the bursts of energy from the great path dissipated immediately when they got near the sarcophagus. Just like before, they tried to launch their attacks at close range. Someone stretched out a hand and pointed at the sarcophagus. His body penetrated and entered the rhythmic storm. Someone else unleashed an amazing sword that pierced through the storm, all the way down. The attacks of these powerful cultivators in the original realm were enough to shatter heaven and earth and destroy the great path. However, they were under incomparable pressure. It was as if their attacks were blocked as they struggled to move forward. However, they were getting closer. Lord Luo opened his eyes and looked ahead. His heart was beating violently. It seemed that the sarcophagus was really about to be opened. He had speculated that the great emperor might have existed in another form, and that the behaviors of these cultivators were terribly disrespectful to the great emperor. If the great emperor truly existed in another form, no one would know what the consequences would be. However, these men were determined, and their minds were made up. It was impossible to stop them. Finally, someone's attack took hold and landed on the white sarcophagus. A cracking sound was heard. The sarcophagus began to crack. It didn't seem so difficult to break now. Bang! The ancient white sarcophagus exploded. At this moment, everyone's eyes were fixed on the contents inside. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 2301, Divine Guqin. Chapter 2301. Divine Guqin. All eyes were glued to the scene ahead. Even in the midst of the emotional struggle, they opened their eyes and stared. They wondered what was inside the tomb in the ruin that had been pulled by the dragon turtle. No one doubted that the will of the great emperor was here, and that it was Shinin the Great, the first man of music in ancient times. Then, was the corpse of Shinin the Great inside this white sarcophagus? Everyone stared at the broken sarcophagus, and finally saw what was hidden inside. There was no corpse, no physical body of Shinin the Great, and no one else either. In the sarcophagus, the rhythmic storm continued raging, and the rhythm was originated from the strings of a guqin. Inside this white sarcophagus, there was only a guqin, one that seemed to be alive, capable of playing divine music by itself. The hearts of all the cultivators were beating quickly. A guqin that could play the divine music? What kind of guqin was this? And who was controlling the guqin? Furthermore, they could feel the will of the great emperor contained within the sounds of the music. Did this mean that this guqin contained the will of Shinin the Great? However, even if this guqin contained the will of Shinin the Great, why was it playing freely, as if it was alive? It even had the power to control those ancient corpses with the music. Could it be? As their thought turned to this, even those who had survived the second divine tribulation felt a great disturbance in their hearts. They stared at the guqin below and realized that there was only one possibility that could have led to such a situation. After Shinin the Great had perished, he might have incorporated his consciousness into this guqin, thus infusing the guqin with life force. Perhaps Lord Luo was right. The great emperor may have existed in another form, such as inside of this guqin, so that he was able to use this guqin to play the divine music. Just as they were considering this possibility, they saw that a few top cultivators had already made their move as they started grabbing at the instrument. This was a true divine item, one that might possess the will of a great emperor. If it could be controlled, what would that be like? However, as soon as they grabbed for the guqin, an extremely radiant divine brilliance erupted from it. It contained supreme coercion, radiating and falling directly on several powerful cultivators. Suddenly, these men were repelled backward, and no one was able to remain standing under that divine brilliance. Even the others who were in the distance felt the pressure of the great emperor that permeated in the sound of the guqin. Their hearts beat wildly as they saw the guqin flying up and floating in the air. The strings on the guqin kept moving, and the might of the emperor diffused from the guqin itself and covered the boundless space. At this moment, those top-notch cultivators actually had the urge to worship the guqin. It was as if that guqin represented the great emperor himself. The sound from the guqin increased its coercion. It was more penetrating than before, piercing into their spiritual souls. Finally, the dragon turtle let out a violent bellow. It seemed as if even the corpse of the dragon turtle was deeply affected by it. All the cultivators were immersed in despair and sorrow. They couldn't imagine how a person could perform such a sorrowful composition. What did Shinin the Great experience to cause him to compose the divine requiem? Futian felt the music a bit more deeply than the others. He was a student of the guqin and understood that the music represented a person's state of mind. The person who could compose something like the divine requiem must have gone through endless sadness and despair himself. For a great existence, such as Shinin the Great, who stood at the pinnacle of music, to have personally experienced such extreme grief was something unimaginable. The extreme sadness affected everyone's emotions, and the sadness only deepened. It was as if even the souls were crying out as well. The body of Xinjia the great emperor raised his head and looked at that beating guqin. Tears seemed to have stained the corners of his eyes. If one is immersed in this mood, what would it be like? Futian wondered. He was surrounded by the imperial will and was closely guarding his thoughts. But at the same time, he let loose of his emotions and no longer resisted. He allowed the sound of guqin to invade his emotions. Since it was impossible to resist, why not accept it and feel the true feelings the music was trying to convey? As the sound of guqin continued to spread, heaven and earth fell into endless sorrow. Even the great path seemed to be in grief. Similarly, the resistance of those major figures gradually weakened as more and more people quieted down. The aura of the great path upon their bodies gradually dissipated. Like Futian, they were slowly immersed in the sound of the guqin, unable to extricate themselves from its hold. One by one, they sank into the mood created by the guqin in endless sorrow. Only those who had survived the divine tribulation of the great path were still resisting, especially those who had survived the second divine tribulation. Their will was the most persistent, but even then, they were being affected profoundly. Their will was unrelenting, and they refused to surrender to the sound of the guqin. In their present state of cultivation, they were only one step away from the heavenly path. How could they be affected by the rhythmic path of the music? To them, this concept was unacceptable. Some continued to try to grab at the guqin. Several others also did whatever they could to try to obtain the guqin by force, using the supreme power of the great path to prevent the music from continuing. But those moving strings seemed to never stop, and round after round of sound waves swept out, making every movement extremely difficult to manage. When they got close to the Guqin, radiant divine glory would bloom from it, like the might of the great emperor. It spread out with the sound of the Guqin to suppress these cultivators. Every cultivator was incredibly tense as the strings continued to move, and another terrible imperial might descended upon them. Once again, those cultivators were knocked back again, and some couldn't help but let out a muffled groan. Although it was just a Guqin, it seemed to be alive, and there was no way to capture it. Those top figures looked at the Guqin that floated in the void, and their hearts trembled. It seemed that Shinin the Great might exist in this Guqin in another form, giving it life. But even if strong cultivators like them coveted the item, they were unable to achieve it. Unless it was the Guqin itself that allowed them access without resistance, it could not be done. A storm of rhythm shrouded this vast space, and everyone seemed to quiet down. The aura of the great path they released gradually dissipated. One may see that there were traces of tears in many top cultivators' eyes. The whole world seemed to be immersed in despair and sorrow. Even the air was filled with sadness. The dragon turtle's sad bellowing was heard at this moment. As it cried, the dragon turtle moved again. Accompanied by the violent sounds, the dragon turtle set off again to smash through those previous defenses. It gradually accelerated along with the sound of the Guqin. It was as if it were still looking for a way home as it had done before. This time, the bellowing continued and persisted, resounding in this endless space in the void. It seemed that the whole world was filled with endless sorrow. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. The dragon turtle set off. Rumbling sounds rolled across the void. Spatial cracks appeared between heaven and earth, and the sound of sad bellowing that came from the dragon turtle seemed to draw tears from the others as well. The dragon turtle set off. Rumbling sounds rolled across the void. Spatial cracks appeared between heaven and earth, and the sound of sad bellowing that came from the dragon turtle seemed to draw tears from the others as well. Even sadder was the divine requiem. Upon the immense body of the dragon turtle, that city of ruin formed a field dominated by the music of the great path. All the cultivators were trapped within it, including those who had survived the divine tribulation of the great path. They, too, were mired in the sorrowful mood of the divine requiem, falling into sadness so absolute that they were unable to escape by themselves. Those who had survived the second major divine tribulation had the strongest resistance, but they could not take hold of the Guqin. Gradually, the sound of the Guqin invaded their minds, sending them into the mood of absolute sadness. This absolute sadness overwhelmed even the strongest of wills and crushed them. Unless a cultivator could strip away his own emotions and desires, he would not be able to break free from this music played by the great emperor. No matter how strong anyone's cultivation was, they had fallen into that feeling. Gradually, apart from the sad bellows of the dragon turtle, the space became extremely quiet except for that desolate, sorrowful sound from the Guqin. Futian had already fallen into this sadness, and knew that he could not, and did not resist the sound of the Guqin. Instead, he had allowed himself to go with the flow, and immersed himself in it. He wanted to see if this sadness could destroy him, but he also wanted to see what was hidden in this extreme sorrow. Because of his musical cultivation, he knew that every musical sound had its own meaning. He wanted to really feel the mood of Shinin the Great when he was playing the Guqin, and see why Shinin the Great was able to compose such sad music. After entering into that mood, the sorrow hidden deep in Futian's heart seemed to be coaxed out all at once. From his childhood until today, even those long-forgotten memories now surfaced in his own mind, accompanied by that music of extreme sadness. All his emotions seemed to be replaced by sadness. Nothing else and no other emotions mattered anymore. He seemed to have returned to the past, directly entering into the memory of bygone ages. He saw Hua Fengliu's cultivation being abolished, Jiyu's death in the battle, and when the imperial advisor of Dali released him as he walked away, all the sorrows of his past came to mind. His feelings were magnified even more to the point that he was unable to free himself. It was as if he could no longer escape. The tears on his face flowed freely, unbeknownst to him. Seeing the appearance of this figure, Yi Futian's heart skipped a beat. It was as if a thought was pulling him back from all that sadness. Was this an illusion? In front of the guqin, a figure appeared. The guqin didn't seem to be playing by itself, but was played by this man. However, no one else was able to see him except for Yi Futian. This is not an illusion. A voice sounded inside Yi Futian's head. This was definitely no illusion, but that he had truly entered the mood and perceived the sight in front of him, as well as the existence of the great emperor. As Lord Luo had said, Shinin the Great continued to exist in another form. His life was integrated into this guqin, and he became one with it. This guqin was definitely not just as simple as an instrument, and definitely not as simple as containing a trace of the great emperor's will. Is it the great emperor? A voice came asked. It was Yi Futian's. It was a voice from his soul. The great emperor of ancient times from countless centuries ago. It was the first man of music. Did his life persist to this day? If so, in what form did Shinin the Great exist? After Yi Futian spoke, he waited quietly, as if for the other man to respond. Time seemed to flow exceptionally slowly. Then the sound of a sigh came out that seemed to contain endless sadness. With just a sigh, Yi Futian was once again brought back into that absolute grievous feeling. However, this sigh caused Yi Futian's heart to beat wildly. It was as if all his previous speculations were confirmed. Lord Luo was right after all. The great emperor had really prevailed. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 2303. The Obsession of Shinin the Great. Chapter 2303. The Obsession of Shinin the Great. After the great emperor let out a sigh, there were no other sounds. He plucked the strings again, playing that sorrowful divine requiem. The sound of the music lingered, but the endless sadness remained. Those who were drawn into it were unable to extricate themselves, and even Yi Futian's soul felt that tremendous sadness. However, but he gradually perceived a feeling in all of that sadness, which was exactly what he had been seeking in the sound of the guqin. He was an expert in music, and understood that the rhythm of the music was originated from the heart. Behind every rhythm, there was a story, a feeling it tried to convey. When he plunged himself into this, it was with the intent to feel, to discover what was hidden in the divine requiem. What exactly did Shinin the Great experience to compel him to compose such despondent music? Even when it was lost, it was still remembered by later generations, and included in the roster of divine compositions. With the sound of the music, Yi Futian seemed to be getting many bits and pieces of information. What he saw in his mind's eye did not seem to be too clear. It was somewhat elusive, like a story intertwined with many scenes that were now projected in his mind. Yi Futian didn't do anything deliberately, but continued to immerse himself in the sound of the music to feel. He already knew that he perceived the mood. He was almost able to see the origin of the divine requiem. The picture in his head gradually became clearer. With the sound of the guqin, Yi Futian's consciousness seemed to have entered into another time and space, as if he no longer had any consciousness of the self, but was now completely immersed in the mood. With clarity, Yi Futian could see two people. One was an elegant scholar, sophisticated and handsome. The other was a woman beautiful and sunny, with a charming smile and a gorgeous face. Although the scholar was very young, one could vaguely discern Shinin the Great as a young man. At that time, he was not yet so authoritative or majestic, and he did not have a strong aura. He was more like an innocent young master, who exuded a delightful temperament. In these pictures, Yi Futian saw the two learning to play guqin together from the same master, who seemed to be a very powerful individual in music. The two of them learned guqin together. Gradually, they got to know each other and fell in love. Where they were, there was a peach tree grove that was exceptionally beautiful. The peach blossoms covered the ground just like something from a dream. They played music together, and composed guqin music. This particular scene felt extraordinarily wonderful. The two were like a golden couple, and their master was very kind to them. He instructed them in cultivation, and witnessed their growth and their love. Pieces of their lives were played out quickly, jumping here and there, and they sailed in front of Yi Futian's eyes. The two had experienced many things together, falling in love, loving each other, experienced separation, frustration, and reunion. They had gone through a lot together. In some of the scenes, the two had also experienced many major events. Yi Futian saw the continuous growth of the young scholar in white. He saw that he had caused bloodshed within an entire clan for the sake of his beloved, and that his lethal music had slaughtered thousands. In the wake of the pile of bones that had accumulated, he left with the woman. Many similar scenes ensued. During their times together, there were too many stories. Gradually, both of them had cultivated to a very high level, and their musical attainments were getting stronger as their status elevated with it. However, every few years, they would return to where they cultivated and play music together under the peach blossoms. They would take a pot of wine to visit their master, drink with him, and view the peach blossoms together. Among those countless events, this one seemed to be repeating the most, as if it was the most important thing in his life. No matter what realm he cultivated to, and no matter how many difficulties he had been through in life, he would always return to the place he was from. Finally, the world changed, and it became heavy and oppressive. The scholar in white was no longer the same scholar in white of yesteryears, but a world-renowned existence. Countless people wanted to cultivate under his tutelage. He had reached the top and became a supreme existence himself. In that era, it seemed a bit easier to cultivate, and there were many supreme existences. When the world was going through great changes in those years, he went through many tremendous wars, but there were not many scenes of these wars. Most of what's been revealed were still those of him with his beloved, until one day, there was something about the battle of the gods. In that battle, heaven and earth disintegrated, and the world collapsed. The entire world began to fragment as the great path fractured. Everything was on the verge of total destruction. It was a disaster for the entire world. And the scholar in white didn't seem to have participated in the battle, until the clan he belonged to was shattered. The peach tree grove turned into scorched earth, and his most respected master also perished. Out of anger, he finally joined the war. However, this battle resulted in the death of his beloved woman. In his extreme pain and sorrow, he cast a white sarcophagus for her. However, in the coffin, the woman turned into a Guqin, wanting to accompany him forever, fighting with him in every battle. So with the help of this Guqin, he composed that stunning music, the Divine Requiem. When the Divine Requiem was heard, the whole world grieved. But in the end, he still couldn't alter fate. Chapter 2304. Take Me Home. Chapter 2304. Take Me Home. Yi Futian was overtaken by the atmosphere created by this Guqin. It was from the sadness he experienced before. It seemed as if every note was no longer just a simple note, but a feeling. A scene from the life of Shenin the Great. His most respected teacher, his favorite hometown, and his most beloved woman were all lost in that great battle. If he had reached the peak of realms, what of it? He was so hopeless that he finally fell into total despair and composed the Divine Requiem, a composition that was known throughout the world. However, the outcome was that he too became part of that Guqin. Those lively notes imprinted in Yi Futian's mind as the rhythm became clearer. Suddenly, a Guqin appeared in front of him, which was transformed by the divine wheel of the great path. The strings of the instrument moved, and every note seemed to be filled with immense sorrow. Each beating note seemed to resonate with the Divine Requiem. Yi Futian seemed to be playing the Divine Requiem. Some experiences of Shenin the Great's lifetime bore shocking similarities to Yi Futian's. The two men resonated emotionally. However, even though he had fallen into that boundless dejection before, Yi Futian seemed to have escaped from it at this moment. Not quite a true breakaway, but he was able to reach beyond the emotion of sadness and had come to a place of acceptance, which was also the feelings conveyed by the Divine Requiem. Only the person who had gone through the progression of these feelings could compose this Divine Requiem. And Yi Futian seemed to have understood something, and was doing exactly that. Although the notes he played were far from the true Divine Requiem, the feelings were there, so that the notes he played were integrated into the atmosphere of the Divine Requiem, as if resonating with it. Gradually, Yi Futian's music became much more skilled, and his sense of sorrow became even stronger. He was still immersed in the endless sadness, but his consciousness was quite lucid, surpassing the emotions he was feeling. As the music played, countless invisible currents surrounded Yi Futian's person. In front of the guqin transformed by the great emperor, an elusive phantom sat quietly there. It seemed to be looking up at Yi Futian at the moment. It was as if he embodied a complete life force, like he were truly Shinin the Great. What century is it now? A questioning voice drifted into Yi Futian's ears, making his heart shudder. The great emperor had spoken, although Yi Futian had been in contact with the will of great emperors before. Aside from Emperor Yi Qing, this was only the second time that he had really seen a great emperor who was fully conscious. He was speaking to him. Elder, it is now the age of the divine prefecture. It has been more than 10,000 years, Yi Futian replied. After hearing his answer, the figure fell into deep silence for a while, then let out a sigh. His eyes drifted to a place far away, then back down at his guqin. He had turned into a guqin, drifting about for countless years, and he had lost count of what year or age it was. Where is home? The sound of a deep sigh was heard. It seemed that Shinin the Great knew that he was without a home. His hometown had long been destroyed. His master and his beloved were no longer there. Everything existed only in his mind, a construct of his persistence. After the collapse of the heavenly path, the world has changed. This is the original realm. After the collapse of the heavenly path, the world is no longer stable. Yi Futian responded, the hometown that you seek perhaps no longer remains. He didn't lie to him. Yi Futian was being as honest as he could be. No matter how stubborn Shinin the Great was, holding on to the idea of home, it was nothing but wishful thinking. There was another moment of silence. The phantom of Shinin the Great looked at Yi Futian and asked, who are you, and why are you in control of the body of Xinjia the Great Emperor? Clearly, he had recognized that this divine body belonged to Xinjia the Great Emperor. I am Yi Futian, the college chief of Heavenly Mandate Academy in the original realm, as well as the palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace in Ziwei Segmentum. I acquired the body of Xinjia the Great Emperor by chance, and resonated with it. This caused the scene seen by the elder, Yi Futian responded. Shinin the Great scrutinized him a little more closely. In short, Yi Futian had already received the inheritance of two great emperors. Ziwei Segmentum, the palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace. Does Ziwei the Great still exist? Asked Shinin the Great. Ziwei the Great had already perished when the heavenly path collapsed. But he had left behind a will to seal up the entire Ziwei Segmentum. Not long ago, the seal was broken, and Ziwei Segmentum was connected to the outside world once again. The will of Ziwei the Great remains in the starry sky world, and was inherited by me, Yi Futian continued. Shinin the Great cast another look at Yi Futian, and that look seemed to contain deep suggestions. Not only did this man possess the inheritance of the two top great emperors, controlling the physical body of Xinjia the Great Emperor, but he had also inherited the will of Ziwei the Great. In addition, he was proficient in music, enough to comprehend the true meaning of the divine requiem. He was able to enter the world of his feeling. Indeed, he was truly an extraordinary individual. No wonder he could play the notes that resonated with the divine requiem, and see everything that was in front of him. Sir, there is nothing ahead. The original realm is no longer the world it used to be. The hometown that you used to know is long gone. I hope that you can let go of your persistence to return to a place that no longer exists, Yi Futian said as he bowed. If they continued, the dragon turtle would keep going and inevitably impact the surface of other realms, destroying them. The worlds in the lower world could not withstand the force of the dragon turtle. They would collapse immediately. Yi Futian could only persuade Shinin the Great to let go of this stubbornness, as Shinin the Great was the only one who could prevent this disastrous scenario from happening. Other cultivators, even those powerful enough to survive the second divine tribulation, had fallen into that endless sorrow in the music. They were completely unable to stop the dragon turtle's forward momentum. The way ahead has ended. Where is the way back? Shinin the Great murmured. His casual sigh seemed to contain a strong sense of loss. He wanted to find a way home, but there was no road ahead. Where was the way home? If he could not find the way back, where would he go? I pledge to find a grove of peach trees for you, sir, and bury the Guqin when the peach blossoms are in full bloom, Yi Futian continued. Shanin the Great looked at him now, and saw from his eyes that he was truly sincere. The Guqin could communicate, and know the hearts of men. Perhaps Yi Futian could perceive his existence through the divine requiem, and understood his feelings. This proved that they were of the same kind, and that this young man in front of him bore some similarities to him. Shanin the Great took one more look at Yi Futian. Divine lights appeared upon his body, shining directly upon Yi Futian. The light penetrated Yi Futian's brow chakra. It bore into Yi Futian's mind and consciousness. Shanin the Great seemed to be connected to Yi Futian somehow. After a while, the divine lights dissipated, and the way that Shanin the Great was looking at Yi Futian seemed to have changed. Perhaps everything in this world is destined, Shanin the Great murmured to himself. He then said to Yi Futian, I will lend you this Guqin for 300 years, until the day when higher heights can be reached in the future. Take me home now. Take you home. Yi Futian looked at Shanin the Great, a little puzzled. His home had disintegrated long ago, and no longer existed. How were they going to go back? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2305, Going to Ziwei Segmentum. Chapter 2305. Going to Ziwei Segmentum. Shanin the Great wanted to lend him the Guqin for 300 years. Judging from the words spoken by the great emperor, it seemed that he had some expectation of him. Had Shanin the Great detected anything from him? Why did the great emperor think that Yi Futian could take him home? Yi Futian didn't quite understand, but he heard Shanin the Great continue. I'll take you back first. Where to? Let's go to Ziwei Segmentum, said Yi Futian. The great emperor had lent him the divine Guqin, and many top cultivators were here watching them. Only in Ziwei Segmentum could they stop the coveting of these people, or at the very least, give them some time to cool down. Very well, Shanin the Great agreed. Suddenly, a terrible rumbling sound came out, and the dragon turtle turned around, and actually headed in the opposite direction. It was moving incredibly fast as it sped through the void, and went back the same way it came. Great waves appeared on the Guqin. Cultivators were knocked off of the back of the dragon turtle. When they were knocked off from the city's ruins, the rhythmic storm on the back of the dragon turtle gradually dissipated as well. But that strong sense of sorrow remained. Yi Futian freed himself from the previous feelings, and looked at the divine Guqin floating in the void in front of him. He felt that everything was a little surreal, like a dream, extremely curious. The divine Guqin floated upon him, as strands of divine glory penetrated his brow chakra, and seemed to have made a certain connection with him. Yi Futian felt a sense of familiarity. He stretched out his hands and stroked the strings. This was the divine Guqin transformed by Shanin the Great and his beloved. It had embodied their emotions for a lifetime, as well as their endless sorrow. Sir, what should be the name of this Guqin? Yi Futian asked. You name it. The voice of Shanin the Great sounded in his mind. Let's call it Yearning, said Yi Futian. Shanin the Great was silent for a moment, then agreed. Very well. This Guqin was then named Yearning. As for those top figures who were knocked off by the dragon turtle, they gradually regained their consciousness. All of them were powerful cultivators, and could recover themselves after they came out of the sorrowful mood. Even so, they still felt an extreme sorrow deep inside their hearts. It was as if the sadness had been seared in their souls, and could not be erased. Perhaps some things still needed one's own willpower to defeat it. The dragon turtle. They looked at the sky above, and scanned across the sky with their divine consciousness. Then, one by one, they stepped into the void, chasing after the dragon turtle. Secretly, they were a little shocked. The dragon turtle had gone in the opposite direction. This seemed impossible. However, when they caught up with the dragon turtle, they saw a figure standing on its back. A man with white hair and white clothing. It was Yi Futian. This made those top figures even more shocked. Him again? How many times was this? The cultivators from the Shangqing domain felt especially puzzled. from Xinjia the Great Emperor to Ziwei the Great, and now Shinin the Great. Why did it have to be him again? On the back of the dragon turtle, only Yi Futian was there. Did this mean that Yi Futian had been recognized by Shinin the Great as well? What kind of existence exactly was this guy? Yi Futian looked at Ren Huangchun and the others. He nodded slightly at them. Ren Huangchun and the others stepped out one after another, arriving on the back of the dragon turtle, moving next to Yi Futian. There was shock in their hearts as well. All of them were trapped in that deep sorrow before. But had this been when Yi Futian contacted Shinin the Great and gained his recognition? Lord Luo was amazed. He made extraordinary musical attainments himself, and was already a giant-level figure. However, he was unable to perceive the sentiment within the divine requiem. Yi Futian must have done it. Otherwise, he could not possibly stand on the dragon turtle now. He always believed that the great emperor was still around, existing in one form or another. Perhaps he had been integrated into that Guqin, or else it would have been impossible for it to possess such power. So now, it should be the great emperor who had chosen Yi Futian. After Ziwei the Great, the inheritance of yet another extraordinary great emperor. This white-haired young man seemed to collect more and more halos along the way. As for the other top cultivators, they each had their own ideas. They had seen the Guqin in front of Yi Futian. This Guqin was definitely a divine Guqin, a divine item, and it was able to play the divine requiem independently. It made them sink so deeply into it that they were unable to extricate themselves. Now it was obtained by Yi Futian. Where is the dragon turtle going? They stared in the direction of the dragon turtle, and noted that it was where the dragon turtle had come from. However, now it was going on the way back. Where did it want to take Yi Futian and the others? None of the top cultivators acted rashly, but followed the dragon turtle instead. Obviously, they still had lingering fears about what had happened before. They were worried about offending the will of Shinin the Great, and that the divine requiem might resound again. It had been proven previously that no one could resist the divine requiem. No matter their realm of cultivation, all would fall for it. The dragon turtle continued moving through the void, continuing forward, passing through the surfaces of many realms. Many cultivators of the surface who witnessed the sight in the void could not help but felt greatly disturbed in their hearts. Lord Luo and other cultivators who were acquainted with Yi Futian also stepped onto the back of the dragon turtle and came to Yi Futian's side. Lord Luo looked at Yi Futian and said, "Congratulations are in order." Yi Futian clearly understood what the congratulations were for. Elder's insight was far more impressive, responded Yi Futian. Lord Luo was the first person to recognize that the great emperor might exist in another form, and he had shown great respect to the tomb previously. Even those whose realms were higher than him, including the existences that had survived the divine tribulation of the Great Path, were not as accurate as he had been. "You saw the great emperor?" Lord Luo asked Yi Futian via voice transmission. Obviously, he had his suspicions, though he didn't ask directly, opting to communicate through voice transmission. Yi Futian did not deny it. "In the depths of the music, I met Shinin the Great." Lord Luo's look at Yi Futian was full of meaning. Although he had guessed it, he was still a little shocked when he heard that Yi Futian had seen the great emperor. To meet the great emperor in the sounds of Guqin was also what he had desired. Unfortunately, it was not meant to be. Time passed as the dragon turtle shuttled through the space in the void, drove through immense space, until it was separated from the domain of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, and headed into deep space. This caused those top figures to wonder. They had been following without making any moves, wanting to see where the dragon turtle was going. At this moment, some people seemed to have realized something. "He is going to the starry sky world," a top figure said, following Yi Futian to Ziwei Segmentum. Yi Futian would be able to borrow the power of Ziwei the Great in that territory. Once the dragon turtle took the Guqin of Shinin the Great to the Ziwei Segmentum, no one could overtake Yi Futian. Yi Futian seemed to be in complete control of Shinin the Great and his will. Could he control the dragon turtle in whatever direction it went? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: You can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2306, Giving Up? Chapter 2306, Giving Up, Shall We Strike? All the cultivators secretly asked themselves. The dragon turtle was taking Yi Futian and the Guqin of Shinin the Great to Ziwei Segmentum. If they delayed making a move on Yi Futian, they would have no opportunity when Yi Futian was in the Ziwei Segmentum. But again, who among them could be sure that they had the ability to deal with the Guqin itself? These top figures hesitated. This Guqin was a real divine item. The strings could move by themselves and play the divine requiem, which ensnared all the top cultivators in that endless sadness. If it could be obtained and controlled, what kind of power would that be? What was more, they had not yet unearthed the secret of Shinin the Great, but Yi Futian may have already done exactly that. A top cultivator from the dark world couldn't wait any longer and struck. He raised his hand to grab at the dragon turtle. Suddenly, a terrible black hole of death appeared in the void, swallowing up everything. This black hole caused a huge vortex to appear in this space. The forward speed of the dragon turtle seemed to be affected as rumbling sounds of horror were heard. This space started to collapse madly. It was as if it was about to shatter completely into nothingness. And the dragon turtle, too, would be swallowed into that darkness. Previously, those who had survived the second divine tribulation of the Great Path had walked directly onto the back of the dragon turtle, wanting to snatch the Guqin. They were attacked by the music and were ensnared in its throes. The fact was that their supreme strength combined was terrifying enough that they could hamper the forward movement of the dragon turtle. Upon seeing this, that Guqin in Yi Futian's arms flew out. It was as the strings were moving by themselves again. A horrific storm of rhythm swept at that top cultivator from the dark world. The invisible rhythmic ripples seemed unstoppable, directly invading the other's mind. In an instant, the sadness that had not completely dissipated rushed into his heart again. The face of the cultivator from the dark world changed. The music from Guqin was still playing, but his figure retreated in a flash, abandoning his attempt to strike. Everyone stared at the Guqin ahead, and it seemed that Lord Luo was right. This Guqin did indeed contain a life force. Coupled with the coercion of the great emperor in its music, it seemed that Shinin the Great indeed existed in yet another form in this world. Otherwise, it would be impossible to explain the phenomenon. It was as if the spirit of Shinin the Great was at work. Did Yi Futian perceive the existence of Shinin the Great? Many cultivators wondered. At this moment, someone else made another move. An extremely tyrannical cultivator from the empty divine realm slashed through the void with his palm, and cracks appeared between heaven and earth. It created a space of exile that swallowed up the road in which the dragon turtle was moving. Instantly, the dragon turtle, which was moving forward, was swallowed up as well. Exile. Yi Futian's eyes sharpened. Judging from his opponent's realm, he could easily destabilize the great path of the original realm, banishing them into a world of nothingness, even opening up a channel to the divine prefecture. Clearly, they were aware that the others wanted them to leave the original realm, to be unable to move forward into the starry sky world in Ziwei Segmentum. The cracks in the space expanded, resembling an entrance to darkness, engulfing the gigantic dragon turtle along with the entire ancient city of ruins in tow. Yi Futian and the others instantly entered this unstable spatial crack where the great path inside was chaotic and disorderly. This was a land of banishment. It existed only when the space of the original realm was broken. But this place could also lead to the divine prefecture. The dragon turtle moved forward in the dark, but the same rhythm persisted as if guiding its direction. Accompanied by some violent roars, the dragon turtle navigated forward in the crevices of the void, then shuttled around and returned to the land of the original realm. However, along its path, the dark cracks became more and more terrifying, tearing the space apart. In this instant, the ginormous body of the dragon turtle was already in another remote place, much further away, as cultivators chased them from behind. Their expressions were solemn. It seemed that no matter what they did, this dragon turtle would continue to elude them. Elders, let's stop here. If the rhythm is still playing as before, please ask yourselves, if you could, Would you retreat under your own power? Yi Futian said loud and clear. The great emperor doesn't care to tarry with all of you like this. But if you insist on this foolery, perhaps you will feel the anger from the great emperor himself. All the cultivators who heard what Yi Futian had to say were stunned, and a great conflict ensued in their hearts. Yi Futian seemed to have indicated that Shinin the Great was still here, alive, existing in the world in another form. He had autonomous consciousness. He could attack them if they continued to be unruly. The great emperor would take action. There was a thoughtful look in their eyes. It was as if they were contemplating the veracity of Yi Futian's words. But in conjunction with everything that happened before, they realized that Yi Futian might not have been lying to them. What he said was probably the truth. The great emperor was still here. Otherwise, none of this made any sense. The great emperor was still here. With the first man of music in ancient times here, how dare they try to seize the Guqin? Since the great emperor had already made his own choice, it would be meaningless no matter what they did. It was a foregone conclusion that could no longer be changed. Give up? Many cultivators wondered. In fact, those giants who had not overcome the divine tribulation had already given up. In their previous experience of all that had happened, they knew that it was futile. It was already a great favor bestowed on them to allow them out of that grievous mood. So what other ambitions could they speak of at the moment? Not to mention that as long as there were other tribulation-level cultivators around, it was far from their turn yet. Just as everyone was considering the matter, the dragon turtle marched forward and drove through the boundless void. Over time, the starlight fell from the sky. It seemed as if they had now entered the territory of Ziwei Segmentum. At this time, some cultivators stopped and did not continue their pursuit. Later, more people stopped moving forward. As they stopped one by one, they looked further down the road that the dragon turtle was on. They knew that there was no more hope. All they could do was watch the dragon turtle take the Guqin, Yi Futian, and the others inside the Ziwei Segmentum. In a nutshell, the dragon turtle appeared with the ancient ruins of a city in tow, and Yi Futian was ultimately the only one who benefited from it. For Yi Futian to be the one to take the inheritance of Shinin the Great, what else could anyone say or do? With such a genius talent to exist in the land of the original realm, divine prefecture, the dark world, and the empty divine realm would not be quiet for long. Sooner or later, the cultivators in those worlds would meet him somewhere somehow. Let's go, someone said, then turned to leave. After that, many powerful cultivators left one by one. There was no point in staying here any longer. They had already entered Ziwei Segmentum. What else could they do now? After they left, the dragon turtle descended on Ziwei Imperial Star. Soon, the news began to spread wildly in the original realm. Yi Futian, the college chief of Heavenly Mandate Academy, and the palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace, had obtained the inheritance of yet another great emperor after Xinjia the Great Emperor and Ziwei the Great. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2307, Changes in Original Realm. Chapter 2307, Changes in Original Realm. Starry Sky World. Ziwei Cultivation Court. Beneath the boundless starry sky, Yi Futian sat cross-legged in a quiet location. Surrounded by stars, Yi Futian, who was fully bathed in the starlight, seemed extremely holy. In front of him lay the Guqin that he named Yearning. At this moment, traces of rhythmic divine light continuously wafted out from the instrument, connecting with Yi Futian at his brow chakra, so that his entire body was enveloped by the rhythmic divine light. In his mind, more and more memories presented themselves, and most of them were connected with music scores and the moods contained in each piece of the music. Shinin the Great was the first man of music in his era. His attainments in music were so superior that few in history could be named along with him, either in ancient times or modern. Naturally, he was not only known for the Divine Requiem. The Divine Requiem was a shocking composition created after his own experience of great sorrow. However, even before that, he was already a master of countless pieces of music, some of which were extremely powerful, and their influence was not much weaker than that of the divine requiem. Now, Shanin the Great was ready to pass on all this to Yi Futian when he regained consciousness again. He promised Yi Futian the Guqin for 300 years. In return, Yi Futian would escort him home. Although Yi Futian was still unclear on the actual meaning of these words from Shanin the Great, he was not about to pursue them if the great emperor himself didn't deign to clarify. For him, the priority was to focus on his own cultivation. Now that he had control over Ziwei Segmentum and the original realm, he felt the pressure acutely. It was not enough for him to be a mere upper Renhuang. He needed a stronger realm of cultivation. Day by day, Yi Futian had been receiving the inheritance of the Guqin, and countless memories appeared in his mind. After a long while, the divine light on the Guqin gradually dimmed, and the strings stopped moving as the divine light went out. However, Yi Futian didn't stop cultivating. He sat there quietly, and he continued to be surrounded by the light of the rhythm. He needed time to perceive and digest the rhythmic way passed on to him by Shanin the Great. There were so many exquisite pieces of Guqin music that he needed time to sort them out in his head. In the ground below, many looked up at Yi Futian. Those who could cultivate in the Starry Sky Cultivation Court were close confidants, as well as allies. As they witnessed Yi Futian inherit the power from Shanin the Great, they couldn't help but wonder what lied ahead for this young man. The sword goddess of divine palace of fluttering snow raised her head to look at Yi Futian. Ning Yuan, I am afraid things will not be quiet for long. Previously, at the Donghua banquet, they knew very well how Ning Yuan, the domain chief of the domain chief's manor, had treated Yi Futian. Ning Hua hunted Yi Futian relentlessly and almost succeeded in killing him. Today, the power that was within Yi Futian's control was far above that of the Donghua domain chief's manor. If Yi Futian wanted to settle these old scores, he could do so now by heading over to Donghua Domain in the Divine Prefecture. However, that was the domain chief's manor under the rule of the great emperor. Presumably, Yi Futian had some concerns as well, so he wouldn't act rashly. However, with his talent and potential, he may very well stand at the top in the future. As long as nothing happened to him, this debt would be settled sooner rather than later. At that time, the domain chief's manor in the Donghua domain would be greatly endangered. As the current situation stood, Ning Hua, known as the #1 genius of Donghua domain, was hard-pressed to contend with Yi Futian. Aside from all the things that had happened in the past, it should not be too difficult for Yi Futian to kill Ning Hua. There were too many means and power under Yi Futian's control, and Ning Hua had none of these. In the Starry Sky world, everyone was quietly cultivating, perceiving the power of the imperial star. Many had made progress. Especially cultivators compatible with the power of the imperial star made progress much faster than the others. Several months had passed, and Yi Futian stopped cultivating and started walking downward. There were familiar faces all around him. Someone walked towards Yi Futian. Lord Luo was heard asking Yi Futian, "How was it?" Shanin the Great was the first man of music in the ancient era. The rhythm technique he cultivated is far too sophisticated for me to fully control and absorb for the time being. These past few months have been far from adequate. I am afraid that I will need to cultivate and comprehend frequently in the future, said Yi Futian. When he heard those words, Lord Luo knew that Yi Futian had completely inherited the musical inheritance of Shanin the Great. How much help would Yi Futian receive from this first man in music from ancient times? No one from the same generation as Yi Futian could compare with him, just on the way of rhythm alone. Fang Gai and Blind Tai came over as well. Although they were from Four Corner Village, they had regarded themselves as members of the Heavenly Mandate Academy after choosing to follow Yi Futian. Since Yi Futian was the center, whether it was the village or Heavenly Mandate Academy, or even Ziwei Imperial Palace, they would be part of Yi Futian's power in the future. They knew this very well. How is it outside? Asked Yi Futian. Not so quiet, Fang Gai replied. Since the dragon turtle dragged you to the Ziwei Segmentum, the news had shaken the original realm, and many cultivators from those top principalities wanted to visit you again. However, because you were not here, they were turned away. but judging from their intentions, it looks like they want to get close to you. At the moment, Yi Futian was the most prestigious figure in the original realm. He had unlimited potential. Naturally, there would be forces from Divine Prefecture who wanted to befriend him. Everyone could see that Yi Futian was definitely regarded as one of the most enchanting genius existences in the Divine Prefecture, and maybe even the entire world. His growth was akin to the journey of those other major figures. If the Divine Prefecture is not aligned to deal with the dark world, what good does it do to befriend me? Yi Futian responded, unless, of course, they could unite all the principalities and launch a war against the dark world. Well, forget about this for now. There is something else. As soon as the dragon turtle incident happened, more cultivators came from the Divine Prefecture, the Dark World, and the empty Divine Realm. Those top figures never left either. They began to search for the ancient relics in the boundless void of the original realm, as if wanting to re-excavate the mysteries of the original realm. Fongai continued. And this time, it is said that several principalities have already rediscovered the relics of ancient times. As if it has been destined that as the entire original realm is changing, ancient ruins are also reappearing one after the another. Yi Futian's expression grew somber. Would more relics appear? And it seemed that there was more than just the one. The original realm was the interface that formed after the collapse of the heavenly path. It seemed reasonable for ancient relics to emerge. Ziwei the Great and Shinin the Great had all appeared in the original realm. The change of heaven and earth originated in the original realm. It seems that this prophecy is not false after all, Lord Luo murmured. Yi Futian's eye drifted toward Lord Luo, and he asked, where did that prophecy come from? I don't know. Lord Luo shook his head. But now, cultivators in the Divine Prefecture and other worlds have all heard such prophesy. Or else the top cultivators from other major worlds would not have descended in the land of the original realm. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2308. Intensified Changes. Chapter 2308. Intensified changes. Before Yi Futian returned from the Divine Prefecture, the original realm had been changing, as cultivators from all over the world began to descend. Now, because there were imperial-level relics that surfaced successively in the original realm, top figures had begun to actively search for them in the original realm. The 3,000 realms of the Great Path of the original realm were now under Yi Futian's control. What happened at the Infernal Divine Clan in the Dark World had shocked the cultivators from all sides. Now, no principalities dared to wreak havoc lightly in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. Therefore, they could only circulate in other places in the void outside the world of 3,000 realms of the Great Path. And now, many more relics had emerged one after the other. Were they being excavated? Yi Futian couldn't help but feel emotional. What kind of a world was it like before the collapse of the heavenly path? That era was known as the Age of the Gods, and presumably, it was much easier to cultivate then than it was today. Even powerful characters were far from what could be compared to today. However, a catastrophe caused the heavenly path to collapse and the gods to perish. Before the original realm, there was the world of the heavenly path. The existence of so many relics was reasonable, but it was not easy to fully excavate all of them. Even in the long history, many secrets had yet to be unearthed. Let's go back to the academy, Yi Futian said. Although he had not yet fully understood all the inheritance of Shinin the Great, it was already imprinted in his mind. He thought of continuing to cultivate in the starry sky world and improve himself. Even cultivating for a period of time would help him elevate his realm and enter the 8th realm. But the current changes that occurred within the original realm were something he wanted to witness. The so-called change in heavenly path originated in the original realm. In which direction would the original realm change? Several people who were around nodded. There were indeed some differences in the original realm of today. Yi Futian was now the leader of the local forces in the original realm, and he should really go back and look things over. Furthermore, those willing to cultivate with Yi Futian hoped to witness a legend in the making. The change of heaven and earth originated in the original realm. For Yi Futian, he would be the king of the original realm. So would he be the main player behind this prophecy? Naturally, the cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy had such expectations. And Yi Futian himself had already revealed this kind of talent. Yi Futian walked down with many cultivators in tow. Yi Futian's every move now inevitably affected many people, and many top-level cultivators were moving along with him. The most obvious ones among them were Old Ma and Blind Tai. These two top cultivators from Four Corner Village followed Yi Futian wherever he went, always guarding his side. Even the top figures from the Heavenly Mandate Academy were hard-pressed to be as devoted as these two. Perhaps it was because the two wanted to repay Yi Futian, Old Ma for Little Ling, and as for Blind Tai, Yi Futian had bestowed him with an even greater favor. After he stepped onto the peak of Renhuang and exacted his revenge, Blind Tai had pledged himself completely to Yi Futian. As for those companions with weaker cultivation, such as Gu Donglu, Yi Wuchen, and the others, Yi Futian did not want them to move around so freely, instead having them stay in the starry sky world in retreat to concentrate on cultivation and improve their realms. After all, everyone fighting in the original realm now were giant-level figures. The least of them were cultivators at the peak of Upper Renhuang. Cultivators of any lower realms were not qualified to participate. The Heavenly Mandate Academy, Yi Futian, and the others descended as they made their way back to the academy. A scan of his divine consciousness through the academy revealed that everyone in the academy was focusing on cultivating. Yi Futian smiled. Currently, the Heavenly Mandate Academy was the absolute core of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, and it is premier holy land, with a completely new look. The cultivators who came to the academy worked extremely hard, looking forward to the day they could enter the starry sky world to cultivate. Yi Futian's figure flashed and arrived at a place. Brother-in-law, Huan Yinyu called out with a smile. Lord Taixian was by her side. You are bothering Lord Taixian again. Yi Futian looked at Yinyu and smiled. Not at all. I am keeping Grandpa Xian company, Huan Yinyu said with a smile. That's right. Yinyu often chats with me so I won't be bored, Lord Taixian replied, smiling, as he peered at Yi Futian. So were you able to control the inheritance power of Shanin the Great? Shanin the Great had much wonderful divine music to pass down, and it will take time to master them all. Yi Futian continued. I heard that some changes took place in the original realm, so I came back to the academy. Is Lord Taixian aware of what is going on outside? I know some of them. Lord Taixian nodded. It is said that several major forces have discovered the relics in the boundless space. Some relics were hidden between cracks in the space, and have now been excavated. Some places, even ancient continents, have been discovered. Many forces from the outside world have shifted their attentions from the 3,000 realms of the Great Path to the endless world of the void, looking for other discoveries. There have been many cultivators who came here to search before. Why did this happen all of a sudden? Yi Futian asked, a little puzzled, as he was truly stumped. That is so. Lord Taixian nodded in agreement. At this moment, someone else arrived, and it was Emperor Nan. He said, it may have something to do with the changes in heaven and earth. I don't know why, but some changes are taking place in the original realm. Those changes had already begun before your return to the original realm. Before, when the dragon turtle carried Shanin the Great, nothing of this sort had happened. But they appeared all of a sudden without warning. It was as if it was destined. What force is leading this kind of change? Yi Futian asked. He really didn't understand. The original realm was the world of the heavenly path once, the old world. After its collapse, everything turned to dust. Back then, the only place discovered was the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, as a place of cultivation. So where were the relics that now reappeared in the void? Where were they hiding before? They hadn't been unearthed for many years. But why did they suddenly reappear now? Emperor Nan looked deep in thought. It was as if he was considering something. But still, he shook his head and said, I don't know. What he suspected seemed a little far-fetched and without basis. If that were the case, what was the reason? He couldn't understand this himself, and there was no way to affirm his suspicions, so he didn't say anything to Yi Futian. In that case, the changes in the original realm may continue to intensify in the future? Yi Futian queried. Emperor Nan nodded. If this continues to evolve, the changes in the original realm may indeed continue to increase in intensity. Yi Futian frowned when he heard what Emperor Nan said. He seemed a little worried. The original realm has now attracted top figures from all parts of the world. If this change continues, I am afraid that the original realm will become a super battlefield, as it was in ancient times, and the cultivators from all worlds will compete in the original realm. I don't know what will happen then, Yi Futian said in a low voice. Emperor Nan nodded in agreement. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2309. Above Expectations. Chapter 2309. Above expectations. Yi Futian and the others did not leave immediately after they returned to the academy. Although it was rumored that many relics appeared in the original realm, Yi Futian knew he couldn't take them all. Now the changes in the entire original realm intensified, with more and more relics surfacing. If he were to grab everything out there, it would almost certainly cause public outrage and create enemies out of the whole world. Take the current situation, for instance. He had the inheritance from several great emperors, thus becoming the focus of many powerful cultivators. If it weren't for the teacher who stood behind him, these top forces would have already attacked him and the Heavenly Mandate Academy. They wouldn't be waiting so docilely in the starry sky world for him to cultivate in peace. One principality wouldn't be capable of dealing with him. But what if they combined their forces? If they couldn't go to the starry sky world to challenge him, it certainly wouldn't be a problem for them to challenge Heavenly Mandate Academy. Yi Futian knew very well that he had to give up some of the opportunities to other principalities in a situation like this instead of swallowing them all. However, Yi Futian had also dispatched cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy to go out and assess the current state of affairs in the outside world. Even if they were not planning to take action now, they must monitor the current movement of the original realm. Now that he had complete control over the 9 supreme regions, he also had eyes and ears in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, so he had an idea of everything that was happening. However, to know the occurrences in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path and beyond, messengers had to be sent out. At present, all that was known had been spread far and wide. Perhaps some had discovered the relics while they were exploring, but they did not make it public. After all, no one wanted to attract even more rivals to this competition. Yi Futian's circumstances were, in fact, a microcosm of all the forces in the entire original realm. All the forces had begun to mobilize, as the entire original realm was developing in this unknown direction. At this time, somewhere inside the original realm, suddenly heaven and earth underwent a terrible and violent change. This space began to collapse as a terrible dark vortex manifested. Later, a bright and brilliant divine light shot out from it, as a group of people appeared with the divine light and stepped out of the vortex. The temperament of this group of people was extraordinary, and one single glance revealed that all of them were unusual, to say the least. They surveyed their surroundings, and their leader was heard marveling. The original realm. This must be the world before the collapse of the heavenly path. An old man next to him nodded. It has long been rumored that the original realm was a land of ruins. Those at the bottom continued to cultivate here, but they never expected that there would still be changes in the original realm. Do you know why? The leader continued to ask. The cultivators next to them looked thoughtful, but then shook their heads. Perhaps someone thought that the world has been quiet for too long, the man said with a smile. But then his smile gradually receded as his inscrutable eyes stared into the distance. He expanded his divine consciousness to perceive the way between heaven and earth. He was heard murmuring, far too weak. If it weren't for the great changes in the original realm, he probably would never set foot in this land. As the man took a step forward, the others followed one after the other. A terrible aura permeated the space between heaven and earth, and there were traces of invisible divine light surrounding the area where they were, so they appeared as if they were some deities. At the same time, in other parts of the original realm, similar scenes played out asynchronously. Just as Yi Futian and the others discussed at the Heavenly Mandate Academy, more and more powerful cultivators made their way into this world. Many of them were peak powers that had previously dismissed the original realm as inconsequential. Still, the changes in the original realm continued. Somewhere in the original realm, many cultivators stood in the void. Their eyes looked up and forward, and somewhere further up in the vast nothingness, the entire space in the void was tossing and roaring. The space began to crack, and from those terrible fissures, massive structures gradually emerged and became visible in front of them. An ancient aura hit them in the face, like ancient mountain ranges from yore. There was an atmosphere of decay that harbored within, as well as a heavy sensation of death. Furthermore, there was a faint breath that quickened everyone's heartbeat. It was as if this aura would not dissipate for years to come. At the same time, in another area of the original realm, a similar scene played out. The space of the void was torn apart, opened by some top cultivator with swordsmanship. It felt like the crack in this space was like a prison, and all the ancient relics were confined within. When this prison was broken open, the relics were released. Slowly, buildings re-emerged in the world. These buildings were full of ancient aura, but also accompanied by a sense of death. As these fissures widened, these newly released relics were becoming more and more terrifying. It turned out to be a boundless and gigantic city. What they had seen seemed to be just the tip of the iceberg. However, this city embodied an ambience of dilapidation, with broken walls and remnants of beams everywhere. It was as if it had experienced some catastrophe in a bygone era. It was extremely fortunate that some of these relics had been preserved, and that they had not vanished in the destruction once upon a time. The top figure who cleft open the space in the void waited quietly beside him, watching a majestic and massive city gradually reveal itself. The entire original realm was constantly changing. The prophecy regarding the changes between heaven and earth originating in the original realm began to spread. By now, they were known to just about everyone. People started to believe in the prophecy. All the changes in the original realm made those powerful major forces tremble. Even the cultivators from the 3,000 realms of the Great Path had heard of this prophecy, and their hearts were greatly disturbed. No one knew what the original realm would look like in the future. In the cottage inside the Heavenly Mandate Academy, Yi Futian was cultivating here when a group of men arrived. They were cultivators such as Old Ma, Emperor Nan, Xiao Dingtian, and the clan lord of the Dou tribe. All of them came from the outside. "What has happened to stir all the elders thus?" asked Yi Futian, as he detected the solemn expressions on the faces of several top Renhuang. The changes that have taken place in the original realm now far exceed our expectations, and there are more and more ancient relics appearing in various places, Emperor Nan said to Yi Futian. Yi Futian's eyes sharpened when he heard this. If Emperor Nan said so, the changes in the outside world must have been drastic enough to cause Emperor Nan's concern. In addition, the cultivators from the outside world have arrived. As far as Divine Prefecture is concerned, it is said that Ancient God Clan has arrived, Emperor Nan continued. Yi Futian's eye focused a bit more as he whispered, "The Ancient God Clan?" "Yes, the Ancient God Clan. The Ancient God Clan, that has lived on for countless centuries, produced deities, and still holds the heirs of the remains of the gods, who are qualified to be called the Ancient God Clan. They are the true power that stands at the peak. Even the Imperial Palace has to pay them proper respect," said Emperor Nan. Yi Futian, in turn, was quite uneasy when he heard what Emperor Nan had to say. It seemed that this time, all parts of the world had been disrupted. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. When Yi Futian was at the Heavenly Mandate Academy, some top forces from Divine Prefecture had come to visit him. However, as he was in no mood to socialize, he gave old Ma the task to receive them in his stead. When Yi Futian was at the Heavenly Mandate Academy, some top forces from Divine Prefecture had come to visit him. However, as he was in no mood to socialize, he gave old Ma the task to receive them in his stead. The truth was Yi Futian needn't care much about these visitors anymore, especially those common forces at the top. With the power that was currently in the hands of the academy, coupled with his own status today, even peak Renhuangs with perfect great paths did not have much to brag about in front of him. However, at this time, Yi Futian personally received a group of visitors who were old acquaintances. More than 20 years ago, these cultivators from Song Imperial City of Divine Prefecture had sought out Yi Futian. At the time, they wanted to take over the Heavenly Mandate Academy and force Yi Futian to cooperate with them, thus making Heavenly Mandate Academy a representative branch of Song Imperial City in the original realm. However, their overture was rebuffed by Yi Futian. And now, Yi Futian's status was no longer that of 20 years ago, and the Heavenly Mandate Academy was no longer like it had been. The cultivators from Song Imperial City came with sincerity to form an alliance, without any ambitions as they had in the past. The Yi Futian of today was someone that all the cultivators from Divine Prefecture desired to befriend. At the same time, in some other location, a group of cultivators materialized in the void. This group of people had astonishing aura, and were all dressed in black, looking serious and solemn. The man leading the group did not appear to be his senior. He looked like he was only 30 years or so, but his actual age in cultivation was something else entirely. There was a sense of dominance in those dark eyes of his, which emitted a strong sense of coercion. The aura of all the cultivators around him was incredibly frightening, as every one of them was a top-notch character. No matter which world, few major forces could come up with such an astounding display of power. Now that great changes are taking place in the original realm, rumor has it that there are many ancient relics in the void world outside the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. I wonder what will we encounter? A cultivator in all black asked. His voice was low and reverent. After so many years, I didn't expect that the original realm would change so drastically. The changes of heaven and earth arise in the original realm. I would like to know just how the original realm will dominate these changes of heaven and earth. Someone else spoke up as they looked at the young man in the lead. But the young man looked down to glance at the boundless void below and said, "Let's go to the Heavenly Mandate Realm first." The Heaven Mandate Realm. The cultivators behind him looked puzzled, but the young man nodded and continued, "The Heaven Mandate Realm, the Heavenly Mandate Academy to see someone." Many around him didn't understand his intentions. Only a very special few knew the reason behind the youth's intention to go to the Heavenly Mandate Academy to meet this special someone. This was a top secret, and few were privy to this information. "Mei Ting, where is he?" someone asked, referring to the Devil General from the Devil World. "Mei Ting. He should be in the Heavenly Mandate Realm," the young man replied. "Let's go." When he finished speaking, his figure floated forward, turning into a black light that moved at an incredible speed. The rest of the cultivators caught up with him, following along. In the Heavenly Mandate Realm, Mei Ting did not fight and search for these ancient relics. He was still drinking within the bounds of the Heavenly Mandate City, much like a hopeless drunkard. However, only he himself knew that although the wine was good, he didn't really drink it for the taste. He was staying in the Heavenly Mandate City for himself. He wanted to know certain things, which he still had no clue about. Perhaps time would give him the answer he sought. Suddenly, Mei Ting peered into the sky above, and his face revealed some surprise, and his eyes betrayed his emotions. He saw a group of men clad in black descended from the firmament, coming directly toward him as they landed above the tavern. The tavern seemed to feel that coercion. Everyone inside fell into dead silence. Mei Ting's gaze was directed at the young man and the cultivators who surrounded him. He said, "You have arrived as well." The changes in the original realm had even attracted people from the Devil World. "Mei Ting, you are having a good time," a demonic cultivator commented. These cultivators were from the Devil World, and like Mei Ting, they were from the Devil Imperial Palace. All of them were supreme cultivators in the devil world. "Are you here for the relics of the original realm?" asked Mei Ting. Everyone nodded. The young demonic cultivator in the lead took a meaningful look at Mei Ting, then turned his gaze to the far distance where a majestic and imposing structure stood. "That must be the Heavenly Mandate Academy, right?" the young man asked. Mei Ting looked at him, then in the direction of Heavenly Mandate Academy. He knew what the other was thinking. He responded, "It is indeed." "Indeed, Mr. Mei is in the mood." The young man smiled and said, "Cultivators from all sides are busy looking for relics. But you, sir, are here drinking and enjoying the view of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Can you enlighten us as to your fascination with this place?" "No fascination to speak of, I'm just bored," Mei Ting replied casually. This young man was rather special. He held superior status in the devil world, as one of Devil Emperor's direct disciples. However, as one of the devil generals himself, Mei Ting's status was not any lesser than the young man's, so he didn't bother affording the other with particular courtesy. Furthermore, the cultivators from the devil world were somewhat different. The rule where the weak were preyed upon by the strong was more pronounced in their world. There were not many politics involved. Only strength was the true metric for everything. As long as one was strong enough, one need not worry about offending anyone else. In the devil world, conflicts and frictions between cultivators who cultivated together in the Devil Imperial Palace were commonplace. Bored, the young demonic cultivator smiled and continued, "Perhaps it is because Mr. Mei is more interested in that academy. I have heard some things in the devil world. Now that I am here in the original realm, I plan to visit their young king." When he finished speaking, he levitated into the air and headed towards the Heavenly Mandate Academy. All the cultivators from the devil world followed his lead. Mei Ting didn't try to stop them when he saw this, but allowed the others to do as they pleased. He wasn't too worried about anything, as he knew the true strength that Heavenly Mandate Academy held currently. In truth, he was rather expectant of any potential conflicts. It would make things that much more interesting. Picking up the wine cup, Mei Ting drained another cup of wine, but his eyes were still focused on what was ahead. The real reason for that young man to come here to meet him was not Futian, the young king of the original realm, as he called him. He thought that it must be because of Sheng. In the Heavenly Mandate Academy, Futian was receiving the cultivators from Song Imperial City. At this time, they seemed to have perceived something as they raised their heads, looking towards the void. They saw that many top figures in the academy had risen into the sky, a grave expression on their faces. They were focusing on a group of cultivators in black that appeared above the firmament. They had sensed traces of oppression, indicating that these visitors were uncommonly powerful. The cultivators from Song Imperial City were equally alarmed when they saw this group of people. The old man who was in the lead was a little surprised. The cultivators from the devil world had also arrived, and they had come to the Heavenly Mandate Academy first. Futian directed his attention there, and saw the young man who was in the lead. The two locked eyes, and Futian felt a sense of hostility from the other. He was a little curious. Who was this person? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 2311, Disciple of the Devil Emperor. Chapter 2311, Disciple of the Devil Emperor Futian sensed the demonic might that circled this group of people. From it, he roughly guessed where this group had come from. Although Futian did not know the identity of the young demonic cultivator before him, there was no doubt that his group was from the devil world. Otherwise, the entire group would not have such an intense demonic aura. The cultivators of the Song Imperial City glanced at Futian. They recalled that Mei Ting had also previously come to the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Why had the devil world cultivators not searched for the relic, but instead came here to find Futian? From the expression in the leading youth's eyes, they were clearly here for him. Could it be that there was some hidden secret behind this? The youth walked down towards Futian. Blind Tai, Old Ma, and the others came forward to block him off, but Futian waved his hand slightly. Blind Tai and the others stepped down, and did not block the youth from the devil world, allowing him to descend and land not far from Futian. The demonic youth said, "College Chief of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, Palace Lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace, the current ruler of the original realm, the top monstrous figure in the original realm, who obtained the sacred remains of Xinjia the Great Emperor, and the teachings of Great Emperor Ziwei, and Shinin the Great, Futian." He seemed to know Futian quite well. The youth from the devil world already knew all the things that Futian had been through. Futian looked at the other party. The cultivators from the devil world, who had appeared in the original realm, before this mainly consisted of Mei Ting. Futian also had some interactions with him. However, that was mainly due to Yusheng. Futian never imagined that there were others in the devil world who paid so much attention to him. It seemed that Yusheng's status in the devil world was extraordinary. Otherwise, this youth would not pay so much attention to Futian's existence. After all, from the looks of this lineup, the youth from the devil world in front of him should be an extraordinary figure in the devil world. "Who are you, sir?" asked Futian. "I am Xiaomu from the devil world," replied the youth. Futian might not be aware of the significance of that name, but in the devil world, this name was already renowned far and wide. He was one of the direct disciples of the devil emperor. He had powerful cultivation and extraordinary status. A direct disciple of the devil emperor might inherit the title themselves one day. Whoever was the strongest would have the highest possibility of inheriting it. Xiaomu, Futian mumbled to himself. He did not know much about the devil world, so he naturally had not heard of his name. However, from the lineup before him, Futian had his suspicions. He said, "Are you a cultivator from Devil Imperial Palace?" "I am a disciple of the Devil Emperor," Xiaomu replied. The expression of the surrounding cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy immediately turned serious. Compared to the monstrous figures from the Divine Prefecture, who came before, the identity of this youth before them was even more spectacular. Who would dare to offend a disciple of the Devil Emperor so curtly? Even though Futian had the backing of Master from Four Corner Village, with the other party's status, it was worthless in their eyes. Why had such a figure come here? Futian nodded his head slightly. He had a rough guess as to why Xiaomu had come. Now Futian was somewhat curious. What was his godfather's status in the devil world? What about Yusheng's status? Now, he was certain that his godfather was a cultivator from the devil world. However, Futian did not know why his godfather had taken care of Yusheng and him. What secrets were involved in this? What happened 300 years ago? Futian believed that it would not be long before he would stumble upon the truth. After all, he could now come in contact with figures at the very top. Even a direct disciple of the Devil Emperor had come looking for him. When Futian reached the peak of the Runhuang Plain, he would probably have the opportunity to meet the figures at the very top. "What business do you have with the Heavenly Mandate Academy?" Futian asked as he looked up at Xiaomu. His voice was very calm. Xiaomu gave Futian a somewhat strange look. He seemed to look highly upon Futian, as expected of the current top monstrous figure of the original realm. Even after hearing who Xiaomu was, he had actually remained unshaken, and was still calm. The white-haired youth before him was an extremely proud figure. "I merely came to see what sort of person the young ruler of the original realm is like," said Xiaomu. As he said this, his jet-black eyes became intense. They were a pair of demonic eyes. He looked towards Futian, as demonic might circled around his own figure. A powerful demonic aura flowed frenziedly, and began to spread out around him. There was one part that Xiaomu had not said out loud. He wanted to see what sort of person that fellow's best friend was like, and where level his cultivation and abilities were. Futian looked at the other party's eyes. The pair of deep, demonic eyes was terrifying. They bore endless overbearing pressure. A vast pressure pressed down on Futian's will. He was put into a hallucination. The person before him was no longer an approachable youth, but instead a demon. It stood there towering above all things, gazing down on all existence. The demon faced Futian, and its overbearing pressure pressed down on him. The demonic might could crush a person's will. Divine light similarly shot out from Futian's eyes. It was dazzling. Even amidst the hallucination, Yi Futian stood on his spot quietly. The divine light flowed around him. Even so, Yi Futian, who had a lower plane of cultivation, was still confident that he could put up a fight against Xiaomu. Perhaps Xiaomu would be the strongest opponent that Yi Futian had faced so far. Mei Ting, who was drinking wine in a tavern in the distance, looked in their direction too. He was also very interested in the battle. Yi Futian was a legendary figure that Yu Sheng willingly followed. Mei Ting wanted to see for himself how strong Yi Futian currently was. Xiaomu would most likely be a huge challenge for Yi Futian. As one of the 8 great devil generals in the devil world, Mei Ting was well aware of the ability of the direct disciples of the Devil Emperor. Those monstrous figures in the outer realms could not hold a candle to them. Being a direct disciple of the Devil Emperor meant that Xiaomu received personal instruction from the Devil Emperor. Xiaomu's demonic art was taught by the Devil Emperor. The top figures from the Heavenly Mandate Academy had serious expressions too. They also realized how powerful Yi Futian's opponent was. Xiaomu was someone extraordinary, even for them. It was rare for them to encounter a direct disciple of the Devil Emperor. The status of Xiaomu was similar to that of Spear Emperor Du Yu, who came to the original realm more than 20 years ago with Princess Donghuang. Spear Emperor Du Yu was a direct disciple of Donghuang the Great. The Devil Emperor, who dwelled far in the devil world, was a mighty legendary figure. How strong would his disciple be? The auras emanating from Yi Futian and Xiaomu grew more and more frightening. The demonic might roared and churned. At the same time, intense rumbling of the great path could be heard from Yi Futian's body. His body turned into the way and became the divine body of the great path. It was domineering. In the previous battles, the Renhuangs at the same tier as Yi Futian could not withstand a blow from his flesh. One could imagine how menacing the divine body, which Yi Futian inherited from Xinjia the Great Emperor, was. Seemingly sensing the terror of Yi Futian's flesh, Xiaomu's body was also metamorphosing. His demonic form was instantly covered with terrifying lightning. Black and purple divine lights gathered and merged with his body. One could sense the power of his flesh even better with their will. His flesh was fully charged with overbearing destructive power. The gazes of the cultivators from the Song Imperial City narrowed when they saw this scene. The cultivators from the Divine Prefecture were rather unfamiliar with the Devil Emperor. However, those long-standing top forces from the Divine Prefecture heard rumors about the Devil Emperor before. An elder said, "Rumor has it that the Devil Emperor is a 1 in a million genius in the devil world. He has created many demonic arts which are unprecedented and unsurpassable. He is a bona fide legend. The demonic arts which he created are all top demonic techniques in the world. They are the pinnacle of demonic techniques. Furthermore, it is said that the Devil Emperor suits his teaching in accordance with his students' aptitude. Based on the cultivation of each demonic cultivator, he teaches them different demonic arts, so that the demonic arts are compatible with the learners." The elder looked at the sky and continued, "Rumor has it that all the disciples of the current Devil Emperor have inherited very formidable power. Since this Xiaomu is one of his direct disciples, he must have inherited some form of demonic art from the Devil Emperor. I'm curious to find out how strong he is." The facial expressions of many top figures from the Heavenly Mandate Academy turned solemn when they heard the elder's words. They were not sure how strong the Devil Emperor was. However, the Devil Emperor was the one who ended the chaos in the devil world. He was the legendary figure who united and ruled over the entire devil world. His name was on par with that of Donghuang the Great. He was one of the very few cultivators who stood at the peak. How strong would his direct disciple be? Even though they had lots of confidence in Yi Futian, they were still uncertain about whether or not he could surpass the difference between their planes and win the fight against this direct disciple of the Devil Emperor. The top figures would not have worried about Yi Futian if his opponent was not a direct disciple of the Devil Emperor, but instead a direct disciple of any of the top forces from the Divine Prefecture. After all, the direct disciples of the top forces paled into insignificance compared with the direct disciples of the Devil Emperor. Xiaomu's gaze was locked on Yi Futian. Both of them could sense how powerful the flesh of their opponent was. One was a demonic form, while the other was a divine body surrounded by endless runes and divine light. Let me experience how powerful the body of the Great Path inherited from Xinjia the Great Emperor is, Xiaomu said loudly. His voice was deep and resonant. It caused the space to shake. He took a step forward. He didn't unleash any demonic arts. Instead, he intended to clash into Yi Futian head-on with his flesh. His super-demonic form was also an inheritance from the Devil Emperor. He refined it with demonic lightning to create his own demonic form of the Great Path. He had successfully forged the super-destructive heavenly demon form. Each and every disciple of the Devil Emperor had to cultivate the super-demonic form. Then they had to merge it with their own flesh to create their own demonic form. The demonic cultivators were very particular about the cultivation of their bodies. Without strong flesh, it was hard for them to unleash the might of the demonic arts. As a direct disciple of the Devil Emperor, Xiaomu had cultivated his body to its utmost limit. His body was domineering. When Xiaomu stepped forward, the entire sky shook and thundered. The demonic might churned and exerted great pressure on everyone else. Yi Futian's flesh was almost invincible. Since he had forged the divine body, he had not met anyone who could battle him with their flesh alone. However, now that he was facing Xiaomu, even he felt a sense of pressure. It made him recall the initial sensation when he first met Yu Sheng. Yu Sheng's body was very strong. Aside from his demonic art cultivation, it was also due to his innate abilities. Having cultivated in the devil world, Yu Sheng's body must have been trained to an even more terrifying level. Yi Futian wondered how Yu Sheng's cultivation was progressing now. However, Yi Futian was not worried about Yu Sheng's cultivation at all. That fellow would certainly not fall behind. His figure pounced forward, and he also stepped out. Both of them did not unleash law power attacks. Instead, they walked straight towards each other. Even so, before they even clashed, an extremely ferocious storm swept out. Intense rumbling of the Great Path filled the skies. The rumbling caused many cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy down below to have goosebumps as they watched the terrifying scene in the sky above. Was this the strength of the flesh that could be achieved by a cultivator? Even the giant-level figures were astonished. Run Huangchun stood out to protect the Heavenly Mandate Academy, preventing it from being damaged by the shockwaves from the battle in the sky. In the sky above, demonic light and divine light swept out. The two of them walked straight towards each other. Then, both of them punched out towards their opponent at the same time. There was no fancy display of technique. Both of them unleashed terrifying attacks, with just their bodies straight towards their opponent. Bang! The sky shook violently. An unparalleled storm swept out around them. With both of them at the center, a frightening cyclone was formed. Their figures were not sent flying. Both of them stood there straight and tall. Yi Futian felt a menacing demonic light surge into his body. The demonic light contained unparalleled destructive power. It wanted to tear apart his flesh. However, the divine light of the Great Path circulated within him. His flesh was almost perfect and would not be destroyed so easily. Xiaomu similarly felt a powerful shockwave surge up his arm and into his demonic form. However, his demonic form had also been honed and trained. In extraordinary locations in the devil world, it had undergone the baptism of countless strikes of demonic lightning. It was an immortal and indestructible body. Even 9th-tier Renhuangs would have a hard time trying to destroy him. Yet Xiaomu was surprised. Yi Futian, who was clashing with him, had not been knocked back. He was taking Xiaomu head-on. It was clear that Yi Futian's body was indeed top-tier. To be able to encounter such an opponent, Xiaomu was feeling somewhat excited. Menacing demonic light flowed, and absolute power gathered in his arm. Once again he punched out. Faced with his overbearing attack, an ordinary 8th-tier demonic emperor would be annihilated with a mere punch. He would not need to attack twice. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. In their opinion, How could anyone from the land of the divine prefecture compete with the devil emperor's own direct disciple? However, Yi Futian not only collided with him head-on, but also confronted him when he was one realm lower. Was this the power of the body inherited from that legendary Xinjia, the great emperor from the ancient days of yore? It seemed that in the land of divine prefecture, this once abandoned land in the original realm, a supremely enchanting genius had been born. This strength was no less than any top enchanting geniuses from the imperial palace. No wonder this man created so many legends in the original realm, someone whispered. So did Xiaomu know that this man is extraordinary? Was that why he deliberately came to the heavenly mandate realm? To fight with him? Someone asked. Many of them did not know about the relationship between Yi Futian and Yu Sheng, which was only known to a few. Perhaps, after all, this man is the #1 enchanting genius in the original realm. He should be proud of himself, given that he's able to fight Xiaomu body to body, someone responded. But the outcome will remain the same. Someone looked up into the sky. This was not the ultimate state of Xiaomu's super-destructive, heavenly demonic form. Super-destructive heavenly demonic form was derived from the Devil Emperor's super-demonic form, so its power is shockingly terrifying. Even though his opponent had inherited the body-refining method from Xinjia the Great Emperor, Xiaomu had inherited the body-refining demonic method of the Devil Emperor. Therefore, they were confident that the winner of this physical battle would be Xiaomu. The collision above the firmament became even more fierce. Again and again, the two met in the blasts, but not only did their momentum not weaken any, but it was getting more powerful than ever. The fierce roar of the great path in the firmament seemed to indicate it was on the verge of collapsing, when these bodies would shatter the great path. In the battle, the demonic aura from Xiaomu intensified, so that it was even more horrific. It was as if he was no longer a human, but instead was made of the flesh cast by the ultimate destructive thunder. As he lifted his hands, hundreds of thousands of black demonic currents flowing into every part of his body, so that his every move contained frightening destructive power. Gradually, Xiaomu's physical body seemed to have undergone another transformation during the battle. It was now completely pitch black, turning into the ultimate demonic body. Bang! There was another violent collision. The two banged against each other again, and at the moment of collision, Yi Futian felt an infinite destructive force rush into his body. Every part of his body was trembling, and he was knocked back. This was the first time the two had been separated by so much distance. Yi Futian steadied himself and looked up at the other side. Xiaomu stood there like a giant demon god at this moment. His eyes were pitch black and fixed on him, full of boundless dominance. He addressed Yi Futian directly. Not bad. I didn't expect to have to use my true strength against you. You deserve to be called the new king of the original realm. His voice was domineering and confident, even tinged with a certain disdain. Divine light flowing around Yi Futian as he looked at that demon body and said, "You are not too bad yourself. This will force me to be a bit more serious." Huh? Xiaomu frowned. What did Yi Futian mean by force him to be a bit more serious? Did he mean that he didn't take it seriously before? His demonic eyes stared at Yi Futian, and he saw the divine light flowing on Yi Futian's body as an even more brilliant light burst from him. Faintly, he seemed to be hearing the sounds of Buddha and the divine light of the sun and the moon flowing about. The light reflected on that body, and a pattern was formed. Xiaomu was somewhat alarmed. Before, was Yi Futian being casual, not using his full strength? Boom, boom, boom. In this instant, Yi Futian's body seemed to be howling fiercely like a terrifying behemoth, boundless divine splendor flowing about. His body moved forward and turned into a light, rushing straight towards Xiaomu. At this moment, Xiaomu's demonic eyes perceived Yi Futian as a deity, full of incomparable brilliance. Xiaomu's eyes sharpened when he saw this before him. He looked extremely grave. He stepped forward, rocking the void as a massive demonic fist blasted forward, colliding with Yi Futian's fist. The people below looked above the firmament, and the two of them seemed to have transformed into real gods and demons. The great path was shattered with one blow. Then, under the shocking gazes of the cultivators from the devil world, Xiaomu's body was knocked away, flying backward. A terrible aura of destruction appeared on that dark demonic body, and the two extreme powers of sun and shadow wreaked havoc in his body. Even as the ultimate demonic body, it was difficult to bear such polarized bodies. The demonic light flowed as Xiaomu ground to a stop, staring at Futian. He realized that he had unexpectedly lost to his opponent in the collision between physical bodies of the Great Path. The super-destructive heavenly demonic form was suppressed and repelled by the blow just now. In the exchange that truly mattered, he had lost. Steadying himself, demonic might roared from within Xiaomu. A terrible demonic domain appeared between heaven and earth, shrouding the boundless space. He stared at Futian and appeared to have lost the edge of that arrogance. But his spirit of confidence and dominance remained. Although he had heard of Futian's reputation and knew of his relationship with Yusheng, he never thought he would lose. Of course, the failure resulted from that physical collision didn't indicate a final outcome.